Here we are, folks, episode 27 of the Connect the Dots NYC podcast. 27 episodes in, and the energy just keeps on building. Today, I interview Jonathan Kumar, founder of Samaritan, a platform that empowers people experiencing homelessness through direct support, financial tools, and community connection. From his own personal experience to making a social change documentary, Jonathan Kumar has truly done it all. So without further ado, thank you for joining me today, and let's get started. Jonathan Kumar is the founder of Samaritan, a technology platform designed to help people experiencing homelessness build the social and financial capital needed to reach goals related to housing, income, and health. Through Samaritan, individuals set their own goals and can receive support from community members and service providers through a system designed to fund specific steps toward stability. Jonathan was born to immigrant parents and grew up in poverty, where his family relied on public programs like Medicaid and community support systems. He later studied informatics and economics with a focus on UX design at the University of Michigan. Before founding Samaritan in 2016, Jonathan co-founded Food Circles, a platform that allowed restaurants to turn potential food waste into funding for local food banks, helping thousands of families access meals through community partnerships. Earlier in his career, he also produced a crowd-funded documentary on social change titled Talim, which was released on Amazon. Thank you so much for joining me today, Jonathan Kumar.
Good afternoon. Thank you, and amazing summary there. Well stated.
It's an amazing summary for an amazing guy. And I want to get started on your background and your personal journey. And so you grew up in a family that relied on community support systems. How did that experience shape the way you think about social safety nets today?
Yeah, I mean, indelibly. My folks came over before I was born from South India to Buffalo, New York in the late 80s. And my dad was a student. He was doing his master's and his PhD. My mom was just sort of along for the ride, and then I was born. And so the three of us, we were living on a student stipend of about $600, $800 a month. And so we very much relied on community assistance. You were on food stamps. I was born in a public hospital. Uh, we were surviving, but the margins were very slim. We we basically were adopted by a group of people at a local nonprofit in Buffalo that had a heart for immigrants and poor students. It was a Christian organization, and they just provided for us financially, relationally, even legal support for us, cultural support, such that when my dad graduated and got a job, we were able to stay in the States because of this group's investment into us. And so, very much learned quickly how much we needed something like this to survive here. Fast forward, you know, 25, 30 years later, when I'm in Seattle thinking about my next step in my career and seeing how pervasive homelessness was, I just started spending time with folks on the street, trying to understand their story, how they got to where they were trying to go, what they needed to get there. Because my background is formally at Michigan in informatics, which is a fancy way of saying, human computer interaction or user experience design. And so with that UX design background, I just wanted to understand the user experience of being homeless. And, suffice it to say, over dozens of interviews with people on the street, I developed this hypothesis that if I could get people the same type of financial and social capital that my parents received as immigrants to the country, most of these individuals would also materially shift their trajectory northward, just like my family did. And the second part of that hypothesis, I believe that that capital existed for everybody on or near the street. I just needed to find a way to get it to these people. And so it's been a remarkable journey since then.
And before Samaritan, you worked on projects ranging from a documentary about social change to food circles. What drew you towards building solutions around social impact?
It wasn't really any sort of special morals or ideals that I had, honestly. Um, the the film, the documentary in India on social change came about because I needed an internship my junior summer, this crucial summer between junior and senior year in college, and I didn't have one. And it was April of 2010, and I had nothing going for me. uh, we we had just finished organizing this conference, this like TEDx at the University of Michigan, and realized none of us had plans for the summer, and we hadn't secured an internship like a lot of our colleagues had done in January or February. And so we basically just decided, let's invent our own internship. Let's go learn from nonprofits somewhere, um, and see what we can pick up. And it just ended up being India, and we ended up taking a camera along for the ride so that we could potentially get some funding to make a film out of it. Um, and so it wasn't necessarily something that I was like, oh, I really want to study social change. Um, even for food circles, um, we had our original concept was eBay, but for restaurants, where restaurants could bid on groups of customers or diners that wanted to go out to eat but hadn't decided yet where to go. It's a cool idea in theory, but it wasn't really working. We weren't effectively selling to restaurants. Um, they weren't paying for our solution. Um, and so we found that having something that, solved true needs in a community versus just wants, was actually better business. When we made the pivot to this this buy one feed one model, where you could pay what you wanted for a specific dish at a restaurant, and that those funds would go to fund a local food bank and put meals on the table for a family. We found that not only was more impactful, it was also more commercially successful. So we were chasing, sustainability and scalability as a business, and as a byproduct, sort of stumbled into social change, and did it as a means to survive and to grow. And so, I sort of fell into it. And in addition to the way I was raised in terms of values, that group from that church that sort of invested in us, and being a Christian growing up, sort of fell into it.
And I mean, you described falling into it from these previous endeavors, both food circles and Talim. What did you learn from building these projects that influenced how you later built Samaritan?
That's a really good question. I'll say that I already mentioned that the sort of increased commercial traction because we were doing something meaningful, and it wasn't necessarily my goal to solve the world's problems, but to build really cool stuff that people cared about and needed. Um, what I learned, I mean, I didn't go to graduate school after undergrad, but I feel like I did, and that my graduate program was in entrepreneurship because I learned how to, do user research, to copyright, to sell, to market, to raise capital, to produce financials, to hire staff for, zero or little wages, um, to validate or to, kill things that were or were not worth focusing on, to let fires burn that could stand to burn. Be your own boss. It's kind of cliche, but to manage your own time, all of those things that I experienced over 3.5 years building food circles in Michigan, and then getting out to Washington, and then ultimately failing and shutting the project down. Um, was able to apply those lessons to Samaritan and give us a much stronger shot at scale and sustainability. Um, so yeah, I would say, that would be the the biggest takeaway. Um, and then, maybe I'll also add just like grit and endurance. Like it's a difficult and lonely journey to build something that no one else quite understands or sees the potential for yet, and certainly not as difficult or isolating as the experience of homelessness, um, but challenging all the same. And and so developing the muscle to persist and push through that, and then also know when to stop, when to move on, when to change your dream. Um, were some of the things I took away. And I would say, like, to anyone listening, like, there's no real substitute for just trying and building. Um, and it's, easier now, faster now, obviously, than it's ever been. You have people who are able to build businesses worth hundreds of millions of dollars, even $1 billion, just on their own using the technology available today. Um, and so, yeah, I would say there's no substitute but just going out and trying things, which is, like what you've done.
Yeah, and I've sort of taken my own little pre-undergrad course in entrepreneurship, so to speak.
You sure have.
And now with that graduate course that or, quasi-graduate course that you took, it led to the creation of Samaritan. And for the people and the viewers who may have not heard of what Samaritan is or what it does, how would you describe it? What is its usage? What is it trying to do?
Yeah, yeah. It means something different to different people. So many stakeholders involved with something like homelessness, and I love Samaritan because there's something that literally every stakeholder, whether you're a business in a city, whether you're a person on the street, whether you're a person walking by the person on the street, whether you're a hospital, whether you're a government, whether you're a church, there's a role for you to play here. But generally speaking, when we talk about Samaritan, we have developed this support platform, this achievement platform that enables people who are on or near the street to access the financial capital, the social capital that they need to find a stable home, stable income, and stable health. Um, so that's what we've created, and we basically will partner with frontline health systems and human services who deploy Samaritan as a tool, as a intervention for some of their most vulnerable populations that they are serving. So we don't employ case managers. We provide the technology, provide our tools to existing frontline infrastructure to help them see better outcomes in their work. We just mail them these physical smart wallets. I've got one in my pocket here. Um, and essentially we mail these cards to um, these providers who are doing outreach, in Penn Station, let's say, or in the hospital or on the street or in shelters. And they provide these cards out as a resource to folks that they serve. Those cards you saw get loaded with financial support each time someone takes a positive action step that they've co-defined with their case manager or outreach caregiver. um, and then they also will start to receive social support from people with lived experience, volunteers, and all in the name of them taking these strategic action steps forward. And so, yeah, that's what Samaritan is.
Wow, and it's truly an amazing, program and those smart wallets and providing social and financial capital to those who need it is truly commendable. Now, when Samaritan started, and I've seen this among many nonprofits, that once you start to build something, it can reach to many different goals and many different aspects of this ever vast and expanding, industry and cause of homelessness. But when Samaritan first started, what was that initial problem in the homelessness response system that you were trying to solve?
Yeah, I mean, that it wasn't working. I mean, there were so many people living outside that felt like they had to beg strangers for help, that they had to live in these tent communities that were really dangerous and had, very little in terms of services. Um, and some of these folks, like, they had apartments with their name on it. They had keys, but they would still stay outside in these tent communities because that's where their community was. That's where their home was, and they didn't have the money to furnish their apartment or to move their belongings. Um, and others like that were like flying a sign or panhandling, like they felt like the system wasn't serving them, and so to meet their needs, they were begging strangers for help. And and I believed, I got to know how amazing these resources, these service providers are, and these programs or solutions around getting housed or getting into recovery or getting a job or an education, all of the above. And I wanted to see more of these individuals on the street in Seattle tap into um like these amazing resources that were available for them successfully. It's really, really hard to take advantage of these community resources, though, on a consistent basis when you feel despised or invisible, that you don't matter, when you're unable to eat or to sleep, um, to take care of your basic needs. And so the initial solution was that we would capture people's stories, on the street through these interviews that we would do, or our outreach team partners would do. And then we would store that story onto this Bluetooth necklace that we would give the person. And we encouraged commuters in Seattle to download the Samaritan app as a critical utility for their phone as a city commuter, because we've all been there. We've all walked by someone who's in need and wondered, like, how can I help? And wondered, like, do I have the time right now to stop and engage with this person? Would engaging actually be beneficial? Do I have cash? Do I have the right number, like the right denomination of bills? If I don't have cash, how can I help? If I do have cash, is this the best way to help this person? And so we would encourage commuters to download our app, turn on their Bluetooth, and by walking by one of our members with the Bluetooth beacons, they would get a push notification by crossing within about 20 yards of the person, where it would be like, hey, this is Terry. Terry's been on the streets for 3 years now. He lost his housing after he went into depression when his wife passed away. Do you want to give him $1, give him 5, open the app to learn more? Um, and it was really cool. The pandemic sort of killed the person to person proximity based use case. But that was, initially what we started with.
Wow, that's super cool, especially the Bluetooth sort of storytelling as you walk by someone who's unhoused is definitely something I find
So
very
yeah, it's like, it's a walk with, not by.
Exactly.
That's how it
Yeah.
goes.
Just like what your sweater says. Is that idea, I know you had mentioned that the pandemic had sort of, put a stop to that. Now with the pandemic, sort of having slowed down and with people returning to, more day-to-day commute on the street, is that idea coming back to life, or are we moving forward, sort of a different realm?
Yeah, it's a great question. So the reason we did that, because we wanted to find a way to get money to these people, money and social support. And that was like the only way we knew how. We didn't have any sort of clout or partnerships with human services or cities or foundations or hospitals, um, you know, that could have provided that capital to other means. Like, we were starting from zero. And so we thought, like, who is most likely to give and trust us with this capital? It's people who are passing by these individuals on a moment by moment basis. And so that's where we got started. And, we would generate $1, $5, $10 at a time. But, it truthfully was pretty hard because we had to keep the Bluetooth necklaces active, which required battery changes every couple of weeks. And and like firmware updates, and we had to get everyone to install this app and leave their location on, leave their Bluetooth settings on, their notifications on or opted in. And it's actually much harder to do today than it was 10 years ago or 8 years ago. Um, and so for those reasons, we aren't bringing back the Bluetooth necklaces, um, but we are able to get capital, both financially and socially, to our members through other means. Our members do have the card and it has an NFC tag. It's not Bluetooth, but the NFC tag doesn't require a battery. And if someone with the Samaritan app sees one of our members, they can sort of like tap their phone on the person's card and bring up their profile that way. It doesn't happen very often, candidly, but it was just sort of a necessary thing to eliminate when we were able to find other ways to get capital to people. Um, the primary way that we've been able to do that is by, partnering with like, major foundations and also health systems, human services, who, pay for a deployment of Samaritan in their city to try and, drive certain outcomes, which I can share about. And, a significant, like our biggest line item for these projects is capital for the members. And right now, we're able to provide $40 to $50 a month that the person can earn through taking these positive action steps. And if there's a need that's preventing someone from taking an action step, showing up for a job interview or, uh, attending a recovery group, let's say like the person needs to have phone service reestablished or a storage unit to store their belongings or laundry tokens, like these types of things that are required up front before a person can take this next step forward on our platform. We have an ability to share that upfront need with our network, who will often fund those things, kind of like you talked about with how you're helping individuals without a home or businesses and enabling donors to pay for some of those upfront fees. It's a similar thing where people can pay for these needs that are blocking action steps from being taken, and cover the footwear or the cell phone service or the bus fare, the groceries, whatever it is.
And I mean, although, and maybe granted, unfortunately, because I thought it was pretty cool, those Bluetooth necklaces might not be returning. Samaritan obviously has, a whole multitude of different programs like you were describing, and its abilities to help to unhoused community are truly unparalleled. However, one thing I found especially interesting was that you had said that Samaritan allows individuals to sort of define or co-define their own goals and then get rewards based off of their ability to complete those goals. What
Mhm.
aspect or what led to that sort of individuality being incorporated in the design of the program?
Yeah, that's a great question. Hmm. I'll take you. I mean, I don't think I've talked about any of our members yet, so I'll tell you a story. Like the first person we ever gave a beacon to was this guy named Charles. He was on the streets for 3 years in Seattle in a wheelchair. He was handicapped. He was accessing services for a little while, and then he just stopped. And so he was on the street in a wheelchair for multiple years. It's not good for your health. So he was in the hospital all the time, in the ER, had significant health issues, significant. And so he's the first person that we sign up, and we were able to get like 500 people in Seattle to download the app, so forth. And he starts getting these dollars from the community that are passing by him, which is so cool. I was brought to tears because I saw like the first dollar transaction on our platform, and it was just incredible, an incredible moment. And and anyways, so he is doing these things, he's getting some dollars, and he's using it for, whatever he needs. We had these partner grocery stores that would accept it as a form of payment. And um and so he would just be getting different food and stuff, clothing, or like drinks, whatever. Um we had this idea that, you know maybe we could create these bounties or these quests, where every oh wait, no, 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 actually, yeah. So to keep his Bluetooth beacon on, like I mentioned, they were battery powered. So you would need to get a new battery every 3 to 4 weeks. And we thought like, okay, let's leave the batteries for free at these nonprofits, and it'll generate like kind of a visit or a touch point with these services that could actually help Charles, get housing, or, get benefits he's entitled to as a person with a disability, things that are so much more lucrative than any amount of money we could crowdfund for him, right? Um, so we would leave the beacons there and use that as an incentive to like help people like Charles go to these nonprofits. And and then we thought, okay, this is working, but let's see if we can actually up the ante and attach like a $5 bonus every time he checks in to get a new battery. And we started doing that, and that was very powerful. Um, so yeah, we just had one person who's like, here's $1,000, like give it to whoever, however, um, just do good with it. And so we use that as like this pot that people could earn from by doing these battery check-ins at these nonprofits. And then so like 6 months later, I didn't see Charles on the street anymore. And so I asked some of his friends, I was like, where's Chuck at? And they said he was housed and he had gotten off the street. He was in his apartment. And I was like, what? Like, how did I miss this? Like, I can't believe it. This is awesome news. And then I later found out, digging into more, that the person who housed him was the person that he met to get his beacon battery changed, every so often. Um, and so that was sort of the initial thing. Is like, okay, maybe beyond just like this peer-to-peer giving, we can like take an understanding of a person's goals, understand what they can do in the next day, 2 days, 7 days, 14 days, 28 days to get closer, just a little bit closer to that goal. And we can enable that through a reward or, something like that. And so that was sort of the initial genesis, and it sort of evolved where now both the individual as well as the the provider, the professional who's kind of giving them the card and activating it that with them, capturing a bit of their story, understanding their goals, their background, their needs, like they are converting some of those goals into action steps to take over the next 30 days where they'll get some rewards, and potentially some upfront funding to hit. And I would say that's like the biggest short-term outcome, is just seeing how quickly the participation rate or the action step completion rate changes when we are able to introduce this financial support and social support from Samaritan. The baseline data for participation in care, or kind of, I hate to use the word compliance rates, but essentially the compliance rate for these assignments or these micro goals is about 20%. It ranges greatly from like 10 to up to 50%. Averages is about 20%. And with Samaritan, very consistently or multiple years, we're seeing it closer to 80%. And, you know, 4xing the participation rate in care, giving people capacity to take these small but important next steps over time consistently, has led to hundreds of life-changing outcomes, in terms of housing, employment, benefits, healthcare, etc.
And I mean, that story about your member and I'm sure the hundreds others that have been helped by Samaritan, and the thousands and billions others that have been helped by nonprofits across the United States and the world are ones that, we hold dearly and love to listen to as sort of proof and success stories that we can, live by. Now, in your experience with Samaritan and with helping others, what do you see as some of the biggest barriers to people when trying to get off the streets nowadays, whether it's in New York City or in Seattle?
Yeah, I mean, first off, like we need more affordable housing. We need to be able to like enact the laws and policies and the sentiment, among our citizens and voters to create more units of supportive housing. So, I'll start with that. The other thing we need to do, besides just creating top-down units of housing, which is such a complex process, is we got to go bottom up and empower people to afford greater forms of housing that exist today. And so, it comes down to money. And that usually comes down to being able to generate consistent income through employment or accessing benefits you're entitled to, um, with different conditions you might have, uh, and so helping people access education, training, employment, benefits, um, like that's a lion's share of what we do, and I would say that our challenge is for people, um, and it's just, I mean, you probably have seen how hard it is to get a job in 2026 with AI taking everything over, and we're talking about people who have smartphones, who have ID, who have email, who can print resumes and walk around and go to interviews, have a shower, have clean clothing, have good access to food, have the medicine that you need, have the friends and family, the college degree. Now just take away all of those 13 things that I said and then try and get a job without a place to store your belongings or an address or even a phone to get a call back on. Um, consistent access to the internet, um, consistent access to positive support, um, clean clothing, a place to sleep. There's just so many challenges, and it makes it so hard to escape these situations. Um, and unfortunately, that's what often leads to mental illness or the development of substance use disorders, because sometimes that's the only way to escape is in your mind or through something that you can get access to that makes it a little bit easier to sleep at night. Um, or you end up in the hospital on a chronic basis, which is not good for anybody. Um, so I mean, countless challenges in terms of getting off the street. It comes down to, it's just really freaking hard, maybe impossible in some contexts to make consistent progress over time. Um, you know, More or less, we see that people have to take 6 to 8 strategic action steps on a monthly basis for up to 15 months. Most people, if they can do that, will get housed, will get, into a more stable situation. But when you're on the street taking, or even in shelter, taking those 6 to 8 action steps month over month for however many months it takes. Some people it's much faster than 15 months. Some people it could take longer. But that's just a really freaking hard thing to do when you're not starting from a place of any stability.
Yeah, and one of the challenges you had mentioned in that sort of list of 13 was the ability to or loss of a community, people who can support you. And this obviously also leads to the sort of mental health issues that you were talking about. But,
Hmm.
when trying to apply for a job or trying to go through life, without friends who have your back or family you can talk to, it only gets exponentially harder. And this is one thing that um, Samaritan obviously emphasizes, that there's the importance of financial capital, but there's also the importance of social capital. So, in your experience, what have you seen is the importance of that social connection in trying to lift people out of
Mm.
housing?
Yeah, I mean, my experience is an aggregate, right? It's not on a individual basis. I can say that we've seen so many people's eyes, minds, and hearts open up when they realize, or they're reminded again that they matter, that they are valued, they're loved. It sounds trite, it sounds cliche, but that's because most of us get that type of social support on a daily or at least weekly basis. But when you're on the street, it's usually because you run out of people to turn to, or you never had people to turn to in the first place. And um, yeah, it's so easy to be set back, and for those setbacks to happen time and time again, where you feel like this is just my lot in life, is to be betrayed, to be forgotten, to be spit upon, despised, to have promises broken, and to have people use me exploit me, take advantage, forget all of these things, or just pretend that I'm invisible, that I don't exist, that I'm not worth anything. Yeah, like you said, exponentially harder to show up and take those next steps. Um, when you don't have any cash, when you don't have any people behind you. So yeah, we have seen like the way our model work is we try and get every member a team of volunteers and also peers, people with lived experience that we pay for their time to actually text, email, call our members on a weekly or monthly basis. Um, we just see like, well, go back to another story. John, who was in one of our Seattle cohorts, he was a Vietnam veteran, struggled after the war with PTSD, addiction, homelessness for many years. Um, he never admitted himself to rehab, kept sort of avoiding it. He gets a membership, gets like $132 in like a week or two, um, which is higher than typical. And then calls us and says, "Hey, turn my membership off. I'm done." And we're just like, "What? Like, why?" Sometimes things happen, people forget what the membership is and stuff, and whatever. Like, okay, sorry, it didn't work out. And then he says, like, "No, you don't understand. Like, I am admitting myself to rehab for the first time, and I'm gonna be off the grid. I'm gonna be gone for 3 months. I'm not gonna be able to use this." And the reason I'm doing this is because I could not get the words that these people were sending me out of my head. Like they just kept ringing in my head. Um, and they were good words. They were words that people shared that I was loved and valued and worth investing in. And this makes me want to do this for myself. This makes me want to invest in myself. And then, so yeah, I mean, he went in rehab and we had to like build a new function to transfer capital from one member to another in our database. Um, that was the first time that that had happened. Um, and so, we hear very consistently how it's sort of the combination and the cohesion of the financial support abetted by the social support and the social support coupled with real dollars, um, that help people have the courage and the strength to take that next step and to show up for that recovery group or job training or housing appointment or case manager or dialysis treatment or all of these 100 things that are difficult but meaningful and over time can lead to massive life-changing outcomes. What we're doing, giving people $50 or a couple texts, like that's not life-changing, but if we can help people take these steps forward on a more consistent basis, and that's what we're seeing very clearly in the data, is what's happening. It's like those steps eventually build to um, you know much bigger, lucrative, in a sense, benefits than what we're able to provide. So it's just about helping people get there.
Yeah, serving that role as sort of the initiator to push people towards whether it be rehab or finally taking that last step or really that first step to fully becoming housed. One thing I had learned through my previous interviews, I'd interviewed someone by the name of Kevin Adler, who had mentioned a concept called relational poverty, where something kind of similar, which is that an unhoused person said he fully realized that he was homeless, not when he ran out of money, but when he ran out of friends and family and people to call, when he was in that circumstance. And that just goes to show how much those, words of affirmation or love that, we're lucky enough to receive every day or weekly, monthly basis, how important that is and how lacking that can really send people into spirals that, only add to the burden of not having financial support.
100%.
No,
Kevin, Miracle Messages,
yeah,
awesome, awesome nonprofit.
yep, and truly doing absolutely amazing work. And one thing I've realized through my interviews is that there's this kind of shift as we get into the more modern world. And I think you talked about this, and honestly, I think you're the right person to ask this, which is that technology has obviously been, there's huge advancements in technology, huge developments, whether it's with AI, or a whole number of industries. And it's coming to the homelessness industry as well, whether it's Samaritan, or I had interviewed Mike Shore from Padmission, and they're using technology as well. And it's being increasingly used in social services. And so, what opportunities do you see for its growth and for its ability to improve how communities respond to homelessness?
I mean, yeah, it's just giving our frontline care teams more time to be with the people, right, than manage systems. It's just like what you hear around like patient scribes in healthcare, like giving practitioners, giving medical assistants more time to be with the patient versus tapping stuff in, and so that helps people potentially get home earlier, and not take home work with them, to see more outcomes for every per marginal unit of time that they put in. So that has the potential to, yeah, like help people last longer in these critical roles as frontline care teams. Burnout, is such a thing, and um, the the well-being of our frontline care teams is just as important as the well-being of our neighbors that they're serving. And so if we can use technology to help people save time and see greater efficiency to their work, like in theory, this has always happened, but you're going to get to see more satisfied teams and more outcomes, which should drive better results and more revenue to these organizations, and drive up wages, as well. So there's a lot that's complicated in that, but you know, and I wish that human services, safety net, healthcare services were the first to get innovative approaches and technology versus the last. Um, but maybe there is some reason for that, and that's not all bad. Um, but yeah, things are changing, and hopefully we'll be able to share the burden more with this critical workforce that is largely responsible for the housing outcomes that we all want to see.
Now, an issue that, I saw when I was developing, my app or website, and I've heard from other people who lead nonprofits that incorporate technology, is that the human aspect is so important when it comes to social services, when it comes to, helping people who are unhoused. That human relationship and maintaining trust is, a vital part of helping people come out of their circumstances. So how do you balance building, a scalable platform grounded in technology with the need to maintain these human relationships and keep this trust?
Yeah, that's an easy one because the goal is to create trust. I mean, that's that's the point of what we're doing, is to generate enough touch points, enough value add interactions between a outreach person and a person on the street, where the person on the street actually feels like that outreach team has their back, cares for them, wants the best for them. And that's what we see happens when a nonprofit offers someone a Samaritan membership. Like, hey, I want to give this to you. It's got 10, you get this card, you get $10 on it to start. You'll get another $10 if you make it back to talk to us, next week. And you're gonna get this money loaded on here every time you take a positive action step towards your goals. In addition to that, like, you're going to start getting these words of support from people who want to help you, pray for you, and it's free. Do you want this? We see pretty consistently 7 out of 10, 8 out of 10 people will accept and take the card. And then they start, on this process where they're getting these real dollars that they can use to meet real needs. I mean, it's not going to pay anyone's rent, but it could cover a cell phone bill. It could get you a meal for the day. It could help you pay for your bus fare to get to an appointment, so on and so forth. You get these words of encouragement, and you start to see the rewards from these action steps over months. And you get a job, or you get you get your housing benefits, like your voucher. you see your vouchers accepted, you're able to move in, you're able to furnish things. Like these mini milestones all act in the name of trust and this human relationship. So yeah, I mean, very much uh, technology should exist to grease the wheels for human connection and make those things most relationships more trustworthy, more consistent, more beneficial. And so when we're doing that, like we're winning. And I think that's the purpose behind what we're building.
Having so much experience working with Samaritan, and specifically having created partnerships with cities, nonprofits, and outreach teams, what is one lesson that you still hold today, or that you've carried with throughout your journey in terms of creating partnerships and the importance of having?
That's a big question. I think when we started, but on we were very, very focused on our end user, the member that was experiencing homelessness, and the case manager, the frontline care team was a little bit of an afterthought, a thought, or maybe even, I don't want to say this, like a necessary evil. Like it was just like a part we had to figure out to get to our end outcome. And and I think just like we were able to empathize and sympathize and understand and walk with our neighbors on the street, but the welfare and the needs and the challenges and the goals and the hopes and aspirations of our frontline care partners, that's something that I think we had to learn. Maybe for some reason that was less intuitive for us, for me, maybe just me, to kind of come to see and understand. And it it took a while. It took a while. And but then, like, your last question, like, you know, how do you maintain the emphasis on human connection relationship? It's like you see how stretched these human resources, like sorry, these human services teams are, like how little they're paid, how many people they're assigned to, what their expectations are. A lot of these folks aren't high above the poverty line themselves. The burnout rates, the turnover rates, and the blame that they take a lot of the time from executives or political leadership or taxpaying citizens. You know, like on average, a case manager might have 120 people assigned to them to like get into housing on a monthly basis, and they might have 30 minutes a month that they spend with a person. And it's just like, what good relationship is built with 30 minutes a month? And so, you know, I think when we approach it, not just from the angle of empowering people on the street, but also empowering the people trying to care for the people on the street by giving them additional support, social support that they can deploy, where they're not the only person in the member's life, in the person's life, trying to encourage them. When they're able to deploy flexible capital, where the individual can meet more needs without relying on that case manager. Um, like when a case manager sees it happen a lot less, where they sink 10 hours into a relationship with a person and then they just drop out of care, because of a completely legitimate reason, but they're just off the grid, they vanish for reasons unknown. Like when we stop that from happening, and when no shows stop happening and people are showing up, when they're taking their action steps, when they're accessing social support outside of just the case manager, like that gives the care teams capacity back. And like that is so important, I think, to think of it from their perspective and their well-being, and what are as the nonprofits on the front lines, like what are their goals, what are their initiatives, because this doesn't go without our frontline partners. And so if we could see it from their angle, and we are helping them be more successful for their own objectives, which is of course to help as many people on the street, then we're not, when we're sitting on the same side of the table and we're like, hey, our goal is that you would be able to get 1,000 people off the street this year instead of 500, or that the average housing placement would happen in 3 months instead of 6, or that your placement percentage would be 60% instead of 40%. Like those are things that they can really get behind and get excited about and go from being skeptics or around the technology or kind of new approaches that we're coming in with as outsiders and partners and enthusiasts and co-builders, I would say, which is what you need.
And what do you wish would change or improve about how communities deal with their unhoused population and how they give support to their unhoused population?
Yeah. I would say, we started with asking people three simple questions, like, how did you get to where you are? Where are you trying to go? What's keeping you from getting there? And, trying to share those with as many people as we could. Because if you hear someone's story, it's a lot harder to walk by them. It's a lot harder to ignore it. And um, I think when we recognize the humanity and the commonality between us and a person that's living day by day on the subway or outside or in shelter, you stop taking pity with them, for them, or on them, or you stop despising them at worst, and you start to pray for them, to partner with them, to help them, um, and to be more generous to them. I think like this problem goes away when we stop thinking that we can just outsource this problem to government or nonprofits or faith groups, and we start owning it. Like the Good Samaritan owned it in the story of the Good Samaritan. It's definitely worth looking up and reading if you haven't yet, or before. And so it's like when we take some ownership of our neighbors and treat them as if they were our sibling or our cousin or our mom or our niece or our grandparent that's experiencing homelessness, like that type of collectivism or ownership. And we all do what we can, which is not everything. Like our model in Seattle was to partner or pair, sorry, like 30 Samaritans with every member and have every of those 30 Samaritans just do one thing a month for that person in need, which is nothing. It's so little. But that means if we have 30 people doing one act of kindness for a person on the street, and we have like 70 to 80 housed, resourced individuals for every unhoused, unresourced individual, like that's every day of the month. Someone is doing something for that person to make them smile or to keep them going. And uh, it's not a lot to ask, I don't think, but it makes a life changing difference for a lot of people. So I think just that sense of ownership, um, and desire to know our neighbor, um, will make a big difference.
Well, I'll ask you one very short, sort of concluding question, which is that for the next generation, for those viewers who are interested in homelessness and don't know how to approach it, what's one piece of advice you have as they step into this new field?
Instead of focusing on doing what you love, try to focus on solving what you hate. Find a problem that matters, that you hate, that other people hate, and focus on creating a solution for that. Simultaneous to that, just spend time with folks on the street. Um, there are these ways you can, prepare a meal, and serve the meal, but don't just give someone a sandwich. Sit down and eat a sandwich with them, and break bread with folks that are different than you. Whether it's like older folks or different resource folks, different colored folks, people that haven't had a chance to go and get a college education or have made decisions or had things happen to them in life that lead them into shelter, buy them lunch, and have lunch with them.
Well, solve what you hate, be the change you want to see in the world, walk with and not by. Those are definitely the key takeaways from this podcast. Thank you so much for joining me today, Jonathan. I really appreciate you sharing your experience and your wealth of knowledge with us.
Yeah, man.